Good morning, everyone. UFC 290 recap. Phenomenal event. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Incredible. We saw 6. Oh, bear with me. Experiencing some technical difficulties here. Here we go. Getting the proper overlay set this morning. We saw 6 underdogs hit. There we go. We're back. We are back. Look at that. Phenomenal event. One of the most electric pay-per-views we've had in a few years. Incredible fights from top to bottom. A number of spectacular finishes. Thank you for your patience, everybody, as we got the proper overlay up. So let's walk our way through this UFC 290 card where we saw the first fight of the night, Esteban Ribovic defeating Kamuela Kirk. And what we saw out there was Esteban Ribovic basically slow roasting Kamuela Kirk, who Kirk did not have the cardio to compete with Ribovic down the stretch. Ribovic was basically terrorized Kamuela Kirk, and you saw at the end of the third round, Kirk had nothing left. And as far as live betting opportunities go, Esteban Ribovic, I was able to lock a few of them in as he basically lost the first round and then came back. And you saw the takedown defense was an issue right off the bat, as we spoke about in the Fight Morning Breakdown show. But he was able to get the job done. It was very impressive. Ribovic, arrow is pointed up, has a bright future in the division, the 27-year-old Argentinian. And let's see where he goes from here. Next up, where we saw Jesus Aguilar brutally knock out Shannon Ross. Spectacular fashion. It was a fight where there was one overhand right thrown and it landed directly on the target, and down goes Shannon Ross. And we've seen that happen numerous times in the past. I believe he's been TKO'd in his past 3 consecutive bouts, and that was a brutal knockout. Shannon Ross was laying on the octagon canvas for quite some time. Brutal. So Jesus Aguilar gets his first TKO victory of his entire mixed martial arts career, and he does it against Shannon Ross. Impressive. But Shannon Ross, that should be the last we've seen of him inside of the UFC octagon, unless you want to give him a fight against Daniel Lacerda. If you, we need to get Daniel Lacerda a victory inside of the octagon. Give me Daniel Lacerda versus Shannon Ross. Imagine what the unders would be, what those odds would be. Under 1.5 might be minus 400 or so. Next up, we saw Cameron Simon defeat Terrence Mitchell, and Simon came in as the massive favorite. Did the job. Short notice replacement Mitchell, who did not look great out there, and we knew Mitchell was basically submission or bust. And this Alaskan regional fighters continue to disappoint everyone except maybe Jared Cannonier. So congrats to Cameron Simon. He was able to basically walk through this low-level opponent. At 22 years of age, the South African faced... I want to see him face some legitimate competition. Let's give him a step up from Ana Martinez. Cameron Simon, with the power of South Africa behind him, and Dricus du Plessis. Looking forward to see what is in store for Cameron Simon next time out. Next up, now this is the fighter who impressed me the most um, in his performance in Vitor Petrino. Petrino did a little bit of a number on Marcin Prachnio, and you could see the difference in striking power here. And also, just it seems as if Vitor Petrino is just built differently out there against other opponents, against the Pleasure Man. Pleasure Man, he could not take the punishment that was being dished out by Petrino. And also, this Petrino seems to have a chin on him. Also, he's one tough hombre, and Petrino also was able to lock up his first submission victory here against Prachnio. Very impressive. Prachnio, 34 years of age. The writing's on the wall. It seems like his career is fading away, and he just seemed like a deer in headlights, and he was in trouble with what was headed his way out there. So Petrino walks away with the victory. Arrows pointed up. One of the brighter prospects at the light heavyweight division. So very impressive. Nice job by Vitor Petrino. Let's see. Petrino, unreal athlete and hardware. Striking leaves a lot to be desired. Yeah, he wings arm punches, and that could come back to haunt him when he's fighting a technical striker who's not afraid to stay out of the pocket. Then you have Tatsuro Taira, who faced some serious adversity out there against Edgar Chairez. Chairez had cardio for all 3 rounds, fought hard, jumped guillotine 3 or 4 times, which is a dangerous thing to do against another grappler. But we saw in the last few seconds of the 3rd round, Chairez had Taira locked up, and ended up that guillotine ended up Taira trying to escape, goes to his back as a last-ditch effort to survive, and basically got saved by the bell. So I personally have not been overly impressed by Tatsuro Taira. I think he's a matchup-dependent type fighter, very long, 23-year-old flyweight who the odds didn't play out. He did not look like a minus 975 favorite at all. You give him the right opponent at 125 pounds, and he's going to be in a world of trouble, especially on the feet. I know he's got the long strikes, but if you're able to get inside on him, a lot of folks can unload inside the pocket on him. So the arrow is pointed down on Tatsuro Taira. His keys to victory are taking the fight to the mat, and he's very long on top, and he's able to, as we saw in the matchup against Chairez, he can rain down some ground and pound, but he's also looking for a submission. So Taira gets the victory, and Chairez, I wonder who we're going to see him face if he comes back, if the UFC gives him another fight at flyweight. We'll see. So Taira was exposed in this matchup. Now, this is an interesting fight where we had Alonzo Matterfield defeating Jimmy Crute, and Matterfield came out, sat back, was waiting for the takedowns of Jimmy Crute, and Jimmy Crute waited, and Jimmy Crute's stock has fallen so far. It is incredible. For what was a bright prospect at the light heavyweight division. I know he's still in his mid-20s, but not a good look coming off of that performance in February, where it ended up being a draw due to Alonzo Matterfield's fence grab. But here, Jimmy Crute spent a few minutes on the feet, did not rush the takedown like we expected him to do. And then once he did try to go for a takedown, Matterfield's takedown defense held up. And that was a bad look, the way Jimmy Crute fought, and also the way he ended up getting caught in that choke. Another issue there. Crute arrows pointed down on him. I saw his gloves come off inside of the octagon, and I thought it was retirement time. This is a fighter who his striking defense, again, I mentioned it was 45% on the feet, which is incredibly low. That means his opponents are landing 55% of their strikes on him. And guess what? Alonzo Matterfield on Saturday landed 59% of his strikes. So 59% of his significant strikes. So that's another issue. So Crute is not winning the striking exchanges, and he's also not able to get the takedowns. So dangerous situation for Jimmy Crute, who has eaten many strikes to the head. And also we've seen him check out of there. And it looked like he checked out of there on Saturday. So sad state of affairs for Australia's Jimmy Crute. Not good. I wonder what he's going to do from here on out, because, how about let's give him Petrino. Let's do Jimmy Crute versus Petrino. I'd be down for a matchup like that. Let's see. Adam says at light heavyweight, that's a death sentence. Yeah, they're heavy hitters at 205 pounds. So Alonzo Matterfield, mid-30s. We know exactly what we're getting from him. Great athlete, decent cardio we've seen, compared to Jimmy Crute, that is. He's able to, Matterfield, hang in these fights as long as they're at range. But you know what? His wrestling defense held up, and he looked solid out there. And then how about Matterfield getting the submission victory? A lot of people didn't see that coming. I didn't see Matterfield winning by submission, but that's sometimes the game we play here. So congrats to Alonzo Matterfield for getting the job done. I had no play on Crute. I did have a play on the under 2.5 here at minus 240, and that ended up cashing. And you could tell that that these bulls were going to lock. They were going to lock horns, but it took a lot longer than expected. And that's partially due to Jimmy Crute just sitting back and thinking that he could strike with Alonzo Matterfield, which was a big mistake. Now, there was a bunch of underdogs that rattled off consecutive victories here. We saw Alonzo Matterfield get the job done, then Denise Gomes, Robbie Lawler, back to back underdogs hit. Denise Gomes landed a strike on Yasmin Yargari, and then throttled her against the fence. So you watch Denise Gomes, and that killer instinct was on full display. In the lead up to this fight, I stressed that this fight would likely not go to a decision, and it ended up ending freakishly early. You don't typically see women getting lit up on the feet and the fight stopped that early, and it ended up happening. So Denise Gomes, who ran into adversity against Loma Lukbunmi, and she now comes out, earns the victory. Also, she has a win over Brazil, and now over Mexico's Yasmin Yargari. So cheers to Denise Gomes. Let's see where she goes from here. And then Yargari, she was a minus 380 betting favorite, and she got smoked out there. So let's see what happens with her. But you know what happened? You watched that fight. She got caught, and then the killer instinct of Gomes was the difference maker there. If she would have sat back and let Yargari recover, it could have been a different fight, but she pounced. And that's key. When we talk about Dricus du Plessis, we'll mention his killer instinct was on full display there. Now you have Robbie Lawler, his retirement fight. Great fight. Disposed of Nico Price rather easily. Had some uppercuts to the jaw, some almost hockey fight-esque strikes from Lawler to the temple of Nico Price in the clinch. And that was it. That was all she wrote. So fascinating matchup. great to see Robbie Lawler walk away with the victory with his hand raised, and he didn't take much damage to boot, which is always a plus. So Robbie Lawler walks off into the sunset. Happy for him. And we see that Lawler moment was the best thing you've seen in the movie. You've seen in a long time, movie type stuff. I agree. How about the way he soaked it all in when he was going into the cage? I thought that was really cool to see. He really took in the moment, and the UFC gave him time to do that, which was nice also. And I like the way Buffer introduced Lawler. He was showing him a lot of respect there. The guy basically sacrificed himself for us inside of the octagon. So great career, longevity, versatility, able to adapt, change. I go back. If you want to watch a great fight, watch Matt Brown versus Robbie Lawler, especially their, I believe, 5th round. That was off the charts. The way that round started, both fighters going for it. Another guy who had a great career, Matt Brown, but he's still going. Then we had Bo Nickel defeating Val Woodburn. Bo Nickel minus 2,100 betting favorite. Some folks say that was value, right? We talked about that in the lead up to the event. And Woodburn, he did what he had to do. He came out and gave himself his best shot. He went guns blazing. He went out guns blazing, and he got countered. And Bo Nickel showed new wrinkles in his game, which is a big plus. So happy for Bo Nickel. And it's a question of, do you want the slow build for Bo Nickel, or do you want to throw him to the wolves? I was on a show last night with John Coe and others, and we spoke about that at length. I personally would like to see Bo Nickel face some stiffer competition, especially if you're buying a pay-per-view. You want to see fighters tested. And Woodburn did not provide that test. He was the much smaller opponent and also less skilled. So cheers to Bo Nickel there. Then we have one of the best fights of the night. This one, for me, was a great watch, because you could see Dan Hooker after a few minutes in there with Jalen Turner. The switch flipped. He loves fighting. That's clear as day. And he poured it on. He went for it after he had Turner hurt. Now, Turner came out on fire like he usually does, and was throwing straight punches and throwing kicks, and he missed weight. That came out to haunt him, obviously. That 3rd round, he faltered. Turner, bad optics, turning his back, looks like he was checking out of the fight, but it wasn't him necessarily checking out. He seemed to fatigue and was eating some shots too. And Dan Hooker did all of this with a broken arm, which is very impressive to me, to watch a fighter compete and win with an impaired body. And we'll talk a little bit about the co-main event in a few minutes, where Brandon Moreno ended up breaking his hand in the 1st round, throwing a right hand at Alejandro Pantoja, and he ended up losing the bout. He went, Moreno, that is, primarily with jabs towards the end of the fight, which were effective, but I wasn't able to get his right hand going. And Dan Hooker was able to get the ball rolling and looked fantastic out there. How did you score round 2 for Turner versus Hooker? Well, the key here, I believe, is the round 3, right? Adelaide Bird with the round 3 for Jalen Turner, which was one of the worst scorecards I've ever seen submitted. That 3rd round, it was clear as day. Turner was throwing some elbows off of his back, and that did not win him the round. Dan Hooker should have won that fight 29-28. I had him losing the 1st round, winning 2nd and 3rd. And Hooker, very impressive out there, especially the longer the fight went. You could see how much he loves fighting, and he was able to dig deep. He had the much better cardio, better head movement. It's been pointed out that Turner's striking defense is only 43% on the feet, which is actually worse than Jimmy Crute, that is wild to me. And he's going to have to shore that up. So the arrow's pointed down on Jalen Turner, and then Dan Hooker, who is he going to face next? Great fighter to watch because he goes for it, and he wants a dogfight. You look at the Felder fight against Hooker, the Poirier fight against Hooker. There are many others. He's willing to go to war with anybody. So, congrats to Dan Hooker earning the victory there. But that third round, for the judge Adelaide Bird to give that round to Jalen Turner was a travesty. Next up, where we have Dricus du Plessis defeating Robert Whittaker. This was an incredible performance by Dricus du Plessis. And what blows me away is that Dricus du Plessis he shared that he knew this was a stylistic nightmare for Robert Whittaker, and this was going to be easy work, and it ended up being easy work for Dricus du Plessis. So very impressive from du Plessis, the way he won round one dominantly, was able to land a head and arm throw, and the ground and pound was on full display, elbows. And then the second round, the killer instinct, the cardio, the shot selection, everything about the fight from du Plessis, very impressive. I know he doesn't look great. He looks like a marauder out there, just marching forward, waiting to be countered by a competent striker, and Whittaker could not do that. The way he looks very clunky out there, du Plessis, and he's the timing. It's difficult for fighters to get timing on him, and maybe Adesanya is going to be the guy to do it, but it's at this stage in the game, we have to take Dricus du Plessis seriously. I mentioned it in the morning breakdown show that du Plessis is a force to be reckoned with, and people keep underestimating him. And he comes out there and wins and wins and wins, and he does so in dominant fashion, and he's incredibly strong. So I believe him when he says if he gets his hands on Israel Adesanya, that he's going to manhandle him. The problem is, how is he going to close the distance? I have concerns that du Plessis may run into some straight punches and some kicks, and Adesanya could potentially KO du Plessis on the feet. But if that does not happen, I don't trust Adesanya's takedown defense against the fence against du Plessis. I think that his physicality, there was I believe it was Clint. Somebody posted that Dricus du Plessis is who we thought Marvin Vettori was, and I believe that to a certain degree. That I'd love to see that fight also, Vettori versus du Plessis at some point. It looks like at this stage in the game, du Plessis would do a bit of a number on Marvin Vettori, and also du Plessis should come out here and wreak havoc on a lot of the middleweights, and he's doing so. So arrows pointed up on du Plessis. And then what can be said about Robert Whittaker? His sole focus has been getting that Adesanya fight back, and I don't know if he overlooked du Plessis. I don't think he did, but it's a sad state of affairs for Robert Whittaker. Where does he go from here? It seems like the candle may be blown out at some point for him. Poor striking defense. Okay, let's see. He gained a ton of fans with that Izzy interaction. Yes, let's mention that also for Adesanya to come in here and just start throwing vulgarity around and walk into the cage while du Plessis is paying his respects to Robert Whittaker, and then to get into Dricus du Plessis' face, primarily because du Plessis is proud of the country that he represents, and a place where he's been born and bred and fought his life and learned the skills of the trade. I believe du Plessis means what he says, and that there's no ill will in his words. Dricus du Plessis is just a proud South African who wants to put South Africa on the map, and there's no ill will there. The challenge is you have an Israel Adesanya who has carried the Chinese flag, someone who is now offended and wants to get retribution against Dricus du Plessis for being proud of where he fights, um, and the country that he represents. So I think Adesanya, some of what's going on here is misguided and misinterpreted, and that is going to put fannies in the seats, right? People are going to watch this. People are going to watch the Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis matchup. They're going to eat it up, but du Plessis will need to maintain his composure. I believe he will. He seems composed, but under the bright lights of a main event, you never know. And Adesanya, we've seen him become a sniper and do exactly what he has to do on the brightest of stages. That Pereira victory, that victory over Pereira was incredible. So, cheers to Dricus du Plessis for he manifested this matchup. I know Adesanya said that he manifested this matchup. No. Du Plessis been the one winning and putting himself in these situations. So, and he did it the hard way too. He asked for Whitaker, said it was an easy matchup, and he ended up pulling that off. Now, let's talk about the co-main event of the evening. One of the best fights of the year, possibly one of the best fights of the decade. Incredible back and forth affair where we saw Brandon Moreno come and use his takedown defense rather early against Pantoja. He looked to be the much stronger fighter who has developed his game, was winning most of the first round against Pantoja, looked great on the feet, and then ended up getting dropped by Pantoja, who still, to a certain degree, has Brandon Moreno's number. I believe that can be said at this point. Moreno looked a lot better than he has in the past two fights. And apparently, I don't know if folks saw him with a large cast on his right arm, broke his hand during the first round, throwing a right hand at Pantoja. I have watched the fight back. I haven't been able to identify when it actually happened, but you can see him shaking out his hand. And that obviously affected his performance to some degree, namely because when you watch the fight, he later in the fight is not throwing his right hand as much. The jab was landing seemingly at will on Pantoja. Pantoja was able to get his back takes throughout the fight. Also was able to land takedowns. I know he was reversed on 3 separate occasions by Moreno, but very, very, very close fight. That could have gone either way, to be honest. I know I leaned when I watched the fight, I leaned a decision to Pantoja, but it wouldn't have shocked me to see a 48-47 Moreno scorecard. I know it was a split decision. Pantoja, I believe, did enough with the back takes late to steal that fight, and the damage that was done by the elbow provided by Brandon Moreno split Pantoja open. That was a as far as optics go, that was a visual that stuck with the audience. But also at the end of the fight, you had Pantoja on Moreno's back, and that ended up, in my eyes, being the difference maker down the stretch. So close fight. Moreno getting the much better of the striking exchanges. Pantoja marching forward despite what's coming back at him. And this was one of the fights that I played heavily Moreno at -165, -175, and -180. And I wonder if that hand wasn't broken in the first round, what would have occurred, because it seemed like prior to Moreno getting dropped, that Moreno was fighting very well out there. And also that second round was all Moreno. And then you had the third round, Pantoja came back. Fourth round was up in the air as far as scoring. I watched that a few times. They were the ebb and flow of the fight game. It depends on what the judges are valuing. And then that fifth round, extremely competitive fifth round, where it looked like Moreno or Pantoja ended up squeaking out squeaking out a decision. So very, very closely fought bout. And how about that post-fight speech? Incredible speech by Pantoja. He bared his soul with the audience, talking about how his father basically um, wasn't proud of his life choices. And I wonder what took place there. I know I haven't delved into that too much, but I wonder if he chose fighting and wasn't necessarily being a provider, or was he being a provider, or I have no idea what was taking place behind the scenes. But obviously there's some deep-seated issues there that he shared with the audience. And he said, are you proud of me now, Dad? Wow. And that his mother basically raised both him and his brothers on their own. So deep-seated issues that were brought to the surface. And great to have Pantoja's family in the octagon, surrounding him, embracing him, and Joe Rogan recognizing the significance of that moment. So that was beautiful to watch. I'm happy for Pantoja. Both of these fighters have won me a lot of money throughout the years, and Pantoja gets the better of Moreno for a third time. So where do they go from here? Pantoja will likely have his first title defense. I'm not sure who it will be against, but looking forward to that. And Brandon Moreno, he'll have to heal up. Also, both of these fighters were battered, beaten, bloodied. So, well, let's see where they go from here. And then you have the main event of the evening, where Alexander Volkanovski took on Yair Rodriguez. And what impressed me most about this fight was Yair Rodriguez. There were 2 or 3 times where he landed some heavy combinations on Alexander Volkanovski, and Volkanovski basically shook them off. And then it was almost like he was offended, like, you got me, now it's my turn to get these back. And he ended up coming right back at Rodriguez and either dropping him or just proving a point that he could get that back. And he did. And he ended up dropping Rodriguez and then pounced on him. The killer instinct of Alexander Volkanovski, off the charts. Very impressed with Volkanovski's effort there. And after the fight, you watch the interview, and prior to the interview, Volkanovski walks up to Yair Rodriguez and says, I took you seriously. I know you're a threat. And Rodriguez was a threat. We saw he had a few exchanges where he really put it on Volk. But Volkanovski, one of the pound for pound greatest for a reason. And he wants that Makhachev fight back. So does he get it? I would love to see it again. But again, that's going to hold up the division at 145 pounds. And then you have Ilya Topuria out there. Where does he go from here? Topuria and Volkanovski face to face in the crowd. Man, that would be fireworks also. So I'll be interested to see where both of these fighters go. Either way, fantastic card, 14 fights, or 13 fights for that matter. Incredible card, UFC 290. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Remember to go get what's yours. We'll take one fight at a time. And I appreciate you tuning in. So have a great rest of your day. Cheers.